So let's begin. First of all, I want to acknowledge that both Lauren and I are readers, or at least we use books for decoration. Good
Very
background.
coordinated.
Awesome. So I just want to talk super quickly here about sort of what is the overview of our event today? What are some of our goals? What do we hope to get out of it? Then I'll introduce Lauren, who is our esteemed speaker. And then I have questions, lots of questions, but probably so do you guys. So definitely throw stuff into Zoom. I'm going to be going back and forth between some of the questions that I prepared and also things that you want to know on the fly. We have 45 minutes, which is not that much time, especially when we have lots of things we need to learn about money. So we're going to go quickly. We're going to do our best to go quickly. And of course, you can stay involved with SoFi, stay involved with Ladies Get Paid, and we are here for you afterwards as well. I'm Claire, by the way. I'm the founder of Ladies Get Paid, but you already knew that because you signed up. Just super quickly, we are a career development organization and we help women level up both financially and professionally. And we do that through webinars like this. We have a video library. We've got a Slack group with women who trade ideas, advice, and paid.com. Okay, so today, quick overview. Thing that we don't talk a lot about with money, I think, is sort of the feelings we have behind it. Getting a deeper understanding of kind of our own personality and maybe even family dynamics and how that is driving our decisions, how that might be influenced kind of our behavior as it comes to finance. So Lauren is amazing. She is a financial planner from SoFi. She obviously can tell you a little bit more about SoFi. And she's going to walk us through basically money mindsets, certain kind of money behaviors that we might be getting in our own way from. So I think getting a really good understanding of sort of who we are when it comes to money is going to help us figure out what to do afterwards. And we're going to talk about investing and money management. And then I'm going to be quiet. And we're going to let Lauren take it away after this. So just a quick thing about Lauren. So she is a financial planner, like I mentioned. So what she does with SoFi, and you can talk about SoFi a little bit, Lauren. So she's always giving financial education and advice to SoFi members. So we are super lucky that we got her to be here for Ladies Get Paid members. And before that, she was a banker at JP Morgan's private bank in DC, where I'm from. So she's certified. She knows what she's talking about. She's an expert, so definitely take notes. Lauren, did I miss anything? Anything else you want folks to know about you before we officially get started?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire. I'm excited to jump in. I know we have a lot of eager people on this call today.
Great. Yes. Okay. So let's start with the money behaviors, money personalities. That was kind of the title and the overview of the event when we pitched it, was just understanding the different kinds of personality profiles there are and how they might relate to money. So tell us, what are the personality profiles, and are there ones that are better than others? Yeah. So what are basically like the consequences of having these certain kind of money personalities?
Yeah. So I love the way that you phrased that because, a couple of things. One, when we thought about what would be most relevant for the audience today, I know that you have provided like an extremely robust educational program for all of your members. And as I was looking through a lot of the content, there is so much information through Ladies Get Paid, but also, just in the universe, whether it's blogs, podcasts, published books, people's Twitter accounts, wherever you can look or would look for financial information or guidance, you can probably find it. But one of the topics that is very rarely addressed or in many cases not discussed at all has to do a lot with who we are, right? So how emotion ties to our financial behavior and how we do have money personalities that really dictate how we interact with money in our lives, not just as individuals, but also in a couple dynamic, whether that's you and your partner or you and a parent that you have worked towards money goals with, even you and your child. So understanding your personality when it comes to money, as well as being able to identify those common money personalities in somebody else, can really help you ensure that you're working together with someone else in the most constructive way. So there are 4 money personalities. And I do want everyone to really keep in mind that it's not designed to be a one size fits all. There are 4 types of personalities that we can have, but some people might be a combination of 2. So it's important to keep in mind that maybe you're a blend, maybe you used to be one personality and you've transitioned into another, but the personalities kind of fall within categories in terms of how they view money. So one is money worship, and this is undoubtedly one of the more common or most popular money personalities. We also have money avoidance, money vigilance, and money status. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of those, but I am curious, Claire, I know you know a little bit about this, but just based on those descriptions, do you think that you could pick out the one you feel you identify with?
Yes. So full disclosure, everybody, I am in the midst of getting a certificate in financial psychology and behavioral finance. So I was very excited to team up with Lauren because this is helping me for my final exam. And I took a test to figure this out, and I am a blend. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I am money avoidant. That is, I do not want to check my bank account. I prefer to live in a sort of fantasy world. I think I'm also a little bit of, I don't know if it's money worship or money status, where I would like to be rich and I want sort of the glamour that comes with it. But here's the thing, my money avoidance, that's contradictory to getting to a place where I maybe have wealth, right? Because I'm, again, living in a fantasy world here a little bit. I don't want to check my finances. So I'm glad, please coach me, Lauren. So also, how do I sort of get out of my own way? How do I reconcile these personalities?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you're able to identify that, and you did touch on some of the most common kind of behaviors of each of those personalities. So money avoidance, your description of how you feel about money or that anxiety is classic in terms of someone who commonly identifies to be money avoidant is someone who just avoids thinking about money, or it causes a lot of anxiety simply to open your statements or pay attention to what's happening in the market. And in some cases, people may not actually feel like they deserve money. So if this is you, keep in mind that whatever your money personality might be, there are habits that we can have in order to just manage it best. We don't have to force ourselves to try and have a different personality. That's probably never worked in any other aspect of your life, but we can recognize our shortcomings or where our personality might impact our finances, and then identify ways that we can manage those best. So if you're avoidant and money gives you a little bit of anxiety, one of the best things you can do is try to automate your finances. So this would be setting up direct deposit from your payroll to go directly into savings, or setting up a recurring transfer so that you don't have to think about moving money into savings or transferring cash every time you get paid, or making sure that all of your bills are set up for recurring payments, auto pay, and maybe having like notifications if something specific is happening. So getting push notifications if you get to a certain level of spending, so that you don't have to watch every day or be the type of person that needs to log in and view your balance all the time, but that you know there are controls in place that you'll be okay if you're not paying attention all day, every day. And then the other personality that you mentioned you feel you're kind of a hybrid with was a little bit of that money status. And that is directly tied to sense of self-worth. So a feeling of money status or a money status personality is someone who really feels that their value as a person is tied to either how much they make, how much they have, or the things that they can afford. And in many ways, money status can cause people to accumulate credit card debt, or be constantly chasing the next best thing. So I know I have a lot of family members who are money status, and I grew up in this type of an environment where you always leased a car instead of buying a car because you wanted to make sure you can get the next best thing. And you sign up for the Apple upgrade program because you want the brand new iPhone every time it comes out, rather than using a phone that's 3 years old. But creating a budget can be a very simple, straightforward way for someone with money status to try and keep that in control. If you are able to tell yourself, here's how much I'm able to spend on something, then you won't tend to overspend than if you hadn't set those kind of controls for yourself in the first place. But I do think that those combo personalities make sense. Does that feel like
by the way,
it
everybody here? Yes, I saw that some folks were asking just to throw into the chat what those personalities are. I went ahead and I did that, and I also added descriptions for them.
Perfect. Okay, great.
This was me preparing for my own test, my exam. So these are my notes for that. And part of the descriptions, and I'd love for you to also to talk a little bit about this, Lauren, is basically the pitfalls of each one, which you already went into a little bit here with the money status, right? Because that's the overspending. Knowing what the pitfalls are, what are tweaks in behavior that we can do, right? So for example, money vigilance, right? That seems to be the healthiest personality. So if you want to talk a little bit about what that is, if you have money vigilance, does that mean you don't have to make any changes, or there's still some like things to watch out for there?
Yes. So I will say I'm probably a perfect example of someone who has transitioned from one type of money personality to another over time. So whereas I used to very much be a money status personality, I have over the course of my career transitioned into more money vigilance. And it's a common belief that money vigilance, someone who is, you used the term type A earlier, describing some of your members, but someone who is very, I don't want to say myopic about money, but extremely focused and vigilant, disciplined when it comes to their finances. Now, that might seem ideal, but there are, of course, pitfalls to that. And one of those pitfalls, especially if you are in a relationship, can be money secrecy. So being vigilant about your finances, or being too vigilant, has a couple of different pitfalls. First, you may be less inclined to share information about money, whether it's the status of money or concerns and stress, financial stress that you have about money, have secret spending, and keep that from a partner, which might cause additional issues. But money vigilance can also really hinder your ability to enjoy what you've accomplished, right? So if we're supposed to be able to enjoy our resources, money vigilance can actually be so overwhelming that someone is afraid to spend, or afraid to actually be able to enjoy what they have. So not any personality is perfect. Some are certainly more constructive than others. But I think when it comes to money vigilance, you definitely want to be having a dialogue. So if you're in a relationship and you're managing your money either with a partner, with a friend, with any type of family member, parent, or child, you do want to make sure that you're trying to be open, trying to be honest, you're keeping the conversation transparent at all times. And you also, by doing that, will build trust, not only with that other person, but with yourself. If you hold yourself accountable for having those conversations, you begin to trust yourself in that you know that you won't go out of control. So if someone who's really money vigilant, who's afraid of using their resources or afraid of spending, is able to build trust in themselves, they may be less hesitant to actually spend or decide that they can afford a vacation, or that they can retire at 65, whatever the case might be. So that would be certainly one of my recommendations there. But please, everyone, keep in mind, whatever personality you think you might fall in, or whatever combination of the two, pros and cons to all of them. And the goal in really learning about this and being able to identify where we are, again, is simply to just raise awareness as to how this might be impacting our habits and what we can potentially do to maximize our finances based on our inherent personalities.
Did we talk at all about money worship? Because money worship and money status to me always, at first look seem to be quite similar. Are they? Aren't they? Yeah, go into a little bit of money worship for us.
So they are very similar. Money status and money worship all even sound very similar. The main difference is that money status is, if we're going to put it in kind of like everyday terms, kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. Money status is very much my self-worth is tied to my net worth, and I won't be happy until I have what's newest or what's best, or I know that I'm making more than my coworker, and you're constantly chasing something. Money worship, on the other hand, is sort of the idea that money will solve everything. If I just get a little bit more money, if I just get a little bit more of a raise, if I had a little bit more, everything would be fine. The idea that money will solve, thank you. Yes, the idea that money is going to solve all of your problems. And, if you just have a little bit more, it'll all be okay. So you're constantly chasing something. In both scenarios, you're chasing something. In money status, you're chasing some idealistic vision of what you think you should be able to afford, or some lifestyle. With money worship, you're chasing this fantasy that money can solve all of your problems, regardless of what those might be. So there is an important differentiation. One way that it helps me to keep those two grounded, I think about my partner. So my boyfriend is kind of a combination of money avoidance and money worship. He could care less about having fancy things. He drove like a car that was over 10 years old. He is happy to wear the same pair of sneakers all the time. He's not concerned about, going to the nicest restaurants or staying at fancy like hotels when we go on vacation. But he is very much of the mindset that if he gets the next raise at work, everything's going to be great. All he needs is like a little bit more in his paycheck, or if we just had a little bit more money, all of the problems will be solved. And that's not the case, but that's how I sort of keep those two separate.
I'm glad you brought up your partner. If and by the way, for everybody who's listening, watching, I went and I put in a test that you can take, or a test that I took that helped me understand my own money personality, my own money scripts. Knowing that your partner may be a bit different, how do you find common ground? Where, to the point you made earlier, which I thought was quite brilliant, is that things aren't going to change, right? You can tweak behavior. Over time, things may evolve, but it's not like you're going to go from money avoidant to necessarily be, checking your bank account every day, which is fine, but you still do need to be on the same page as your partner. So how do you sync up with your money personalities?
Yeah, so I think identifying your money personality and the money personality of your partner is a preliminary step at best. It's helpful because it's going to give you a little bit of insight, and you can objectively see where your personalities are different, and it can help you understand how to better communicate with them. So with a partner who is money avoidant, it seems great because he is happy to have me manage all the finances. You're the professional, you like to be on top of this anyway. I'm happy to just like be in the dark. I never want to think about it. As ideal as that might be, I can't leave him in the dark. He can't not know anything that's going on with the finances, but it does help me realize this is stressful for him. He doesn't like to look at financial spreadsheets every day, which I do. I'm like a nerd like that. I don't even just do it for work. I do it for myself, like for fun. But I recognize that it's more effective for me to touch base with him like once a month and just give him an update on what's changed or what's happening or things that I want him to be thinking about, rather than every time I think of something, share it with him, because that will stress him out and he will only want to avoid it more. But setting an expectation with him, like, I want to talk about what's happening financially with you. Can we discuss this later? And then this kind of scheduling a time, setting the expectation that we're going to have that conversation, and then doing it at a set cadence so that he knows to expect it. I know that we have it scheduled, so I can kind of save up all the things that I want to talk about, so it happens in a, communicated in a fashion that's effective for both of us. So that's one example, but it is, again, to help each of you understand how to better communicate with one another. This is not, identifying a money personality is not an excuse to be like, oh, you're this personality and I'm another personality, so therefore I can spend as much as I want and you're going to be the one that budgets. That's not how it works. It's really to be able to figure out, okay, how do we best do this together? And one of the other ways to answer that is, what role do we each want to play in this conversation? So are we each going to kind of like divvy up the money management? Is one person going to be responsible for the investments and someone else manages the checkbook? Or are we going to kind of like rotate who does these things? And by opening it up and recognizing that there are different roles that we can play, different levels of responsibility, it gives everyone kind of like the opportunity to step up and really do what's comfortable for them.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking at first we would want to find somebody who has the same personality, money personality as us. But then I realized if two people are money avoidant, probably not great. Is there an ideal personality that fits together? And should we be asking this on our dating profiles?
Right. So that is an excellent question. I don't know that there is necessarily an ideal combination. I would agree that two of the same personality, probably not great. Too money avoidance, definitely not a great idea. But even, too money status, sounds like those people are going to be digging themselves out of debt for the rest of their lives. I think in an ideal scenario, you could maybe have a little bit of everything. So a little bit of money avoidance will help offset a little bit of money worship, and a little bit of money vigilance will help offset a little bit of money status. But I certainly don't think we can start our own dating app or algorithm to find perfect matches based on money personality alone, although that would be very interesting.
Okay, anybody listening, if you're going to go forth and do this, perhaps just a little bit of equity.
Trademark.
Just a little equity. Last question I have about money personalities before we move on to investing and to money management is shame, right? A lot of people have shame around money. And even just looking at Alana here, she wrote, I'm money workshop and I need help, but I think I'm going to guess you meant money worship and I need help. Here's the thing. When we start to dig into our money personalities, with the exception of vigilance, all of them seem a bit negative, although you just said vigilance can turn into not spending and that can be a problem. As we're reading about our own personalities, I'm seeing all of these things to be concerned about. Now I feel guilty or I have shame because I'm afraid to look at my bank account. Do you have any suggestions on how we can kind of not judge ourselves when we're beginning to understand more of who we are and our relationship to money?
Yes. So I think we have to take a kind approach with ourselves, just like we would in any other endeavor. So whether you're trying to like get in shape because you want to run a marathon, you're not going to beat yourself up if like you can't run 26 miles your first day, right? So we recognize that everything in life is a process. If you're trying to be more disciplined about your finances or better manage your money in general, it's a process. You don't just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I haven't been very responsible. I don't love the choices that I've made financially. I have a little bit of debt, or, I haven't saved very much. tomorrow I'm going to be a different person. It just doesn't work that way. So, managing your finances and putting yourself on track is just that. It's not a decision that you make. It's a process that you live through. So it's all about slowly changing your habits, educating yourself, making sure that you're making wiser decisions every day. And does that mean that you only ever make great decisions? Absolutely not. But if you are trending in the right direction, if directionally you're headed into a more desirable place than you were before, you're making progress. It's similar to, I hate that we equate things financially to like dieting so often. I know that there are just so many analogies to use though. So forgive me, I'm going to use the same one. But similarly, if you're on a diet, if you're just trying to eat better, if you're after Whole30 because you just want to take better care of your body, but Saturday night comes along and you're seeing people that you haven't been able to hang out with for 7 months, and you wind up having 1 or 2 more drinks than you thought you were going to have, or maybe you indulged in something that you weren't planning on. Are you going to beat yourself up the next day, or should you? Some people will, but is it necessary or constructive? Not really. You recognize that maybe there were some things you could have done a little bit differently to plan, but we recognize that maybe we had a misstep. It doesn't mean we're off course. It just means we are going to continue to trend in the right direction. And the next time something similar comes along, we're better equipped to plan or avoid any pitfalls.
By the way, everybody, something that I had to do for class that I found to be quite helpful when it came to understanding my personality, but also compartmentalizing the shame, being able to be objective about it, was interviewing my parents about their relationship to money. And then understanding it from my grandparents. I mean, it really was more like, what do you think your relationship is with money? And starting with, what are your earliest memories with money? And what was interesting for me, and going all the way back to my great grandparents, was seeing how it evolved, seeing where their personalities were and the strains of it, right? Where I get it from, but also how it's evolved over time, how each generation, attempted to improve on the generation about, before. And I just found it, A, to be really fascinating, and B, it relieved some of that self-judgment because I could blame them. Just kidding. At least you begin to understand yourself. And then when you begin to understand yourself, then you can deal with it. And that's also why I'm so glad that we're doing this webinar, because it is the first step to understanding it. I want to draw attention to a question that was asked. I believe you sort of already answered it, but I want to make sure Joy gets heard. Joy Waite, she said, can a relationship work if a couple has different views about money, saving, spending, buying property, etc.? I know there's a lot more context that's probably needed there, but what are your thoughts off the bat?
So I would say that alone would not determine whether or not a relationship is kind of like destined for success or doomed for failure. There are a lot of other things that we can address and should before worrying about whether our habits are different or our money personalities are different or conflicting. And I think we can start by addressing our values. So one of the most constructive things couples can do at any stage is identifying the things that are inherently most important to you. We're not talking about money necessarily or financial things like home ownership or early retirement. We're just talking about what's important to you. Do you value your family? Do you value fun? Do you value security? Do you value religion? And trying to identify the things that are most important to us, and hopefully within those values, there's some overlap. And if you can find overlap in those values, you can find ways to tie those values to your money goals. If you're able to share joint money goals that align with your values, even if your personalities or styles are a little bit different, it's okay, because you can use it as like a guiding light. And wow, that's a soap opera from a very long time ago. But
I'm like, yes.
I was a Young and the Restless fan, but I'm pretty sure Guiding Light came on later in the day.
I was Passions. Passions.
All great. Or anyway, too much of a tangent. But if you're able to identify values that you share, and you can identify goals that'll help you with those values that you share as a couple, then you're able to not fix your habits or the different behaviors that you each have, but you have incentive to overcome them. So if someone is a little bit more of a spendthrift than the other, but you both know that security is something that you really value, and in order to feel secure, you need a fully funded emergency fund of 6 months worth of your essential expenses, then knowing that this is something that's jointly important to both of you, and that obtaining that goal will help each of you sleep better at night, it is more incentive for someone to keep their habits in check than if you hadn't really taken that 30,000-foot view of what you want in life. And I do think it can be a very effective way to try to manage your finances together without trying to change each other's behavior.
Love that. Love that. Giving a shout out to Kathy here because I thought her question's brilliant. Is there trending when comparing money personalities to financial status? So, for example, people who are wealthy versus people at the poverty level.
Oh, I see. That's really interesting. And my inclination is to say no, primarily because where we might fall in terms of like net worth, whatever dollar amount that might be, on a relative basis, can cause someone to feel very differently. So you might have someone with a net worth of $3 million who feels poor because they're surrounded by people who have $10 million.
Right.
And vice versa, you might have $1,000 in the bank, but if you're a college student, like you're rolling in it compared to potentially some of the other people that you're spending all of your time with. So I don't think that there's a magic number in terms of net worth. A big part of what might drive your personality, but also why net worth might feel like it has something to do with your personality, is really going to be dependent on who you're surrounding yourself with and how much you measure your net worth against others.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that was helpful.
Sarah asked a really good question, but I think it may be able to be answered by this test that I just sent your way. But we can circle back to it once we, because we've got about 10, 15 more minutes left. But I see you, Sarah. I see you, girl. I got you. So let's talk a little bit about personality behaviors and how they affect the way that you deal with money. And I know there's some gendered stuff here. Loss aversion. What's loss aversion? Talk to me about that, and what the differences you see between maybe men and women when it comes to dealing with your money.
Yeah, so and I think someone had asked a question that aligned with this in advance in terms of fear of risk when it comes to investing, or being really nervous about investing because they're just a really good saver. And loss aversion is just very simply the concept of being fearful of taking risk because the idea of loss is so much worse than the positive feeling that you could get from an equivalent prospective gain. So, for example, if you were going to invest $500 and the idea of losing $100 felt crippling, but the idea of gaining $100 on that investment felt less impactful, someone who felt that way, who had that loss aversion, would be most likely not to invest at all, just at the prospect of potentially seeing that risk or experiencing that scenario of loss. And where gender plays a factor in this is is not that women experience loss aversion and men don't, but women do tend to allow kind of loss aversion to be a more permanent state. So someone may, I always like to say we have better memories than men. Which can be both positive or negative. But if someone experiences loss, maybe very early on in their investing career, and it puts a bad taste in your mouth, they might be less likely to try investing again later, whereas a male may be a little bit more resilient and willing to take on that risk again at a later date. But generally, there isn't as much of an investing gap as the sort of like headlines would lead you to believe. The gap is more with allocation and risk. So generally, male investors do feel a little bit more comfortable taking on higher levels of risk than females do.
By the way, Sarah, I had misunderstood your question. I thought you were asking about money scripts, but it looks like you were asking more about like being ready to invest, but maybe not being able to identify the why. I mean, Lauren, if you want to talk a little bit more about investing, I mean, I know you just covered loss aversion, and that's obviously, taking risks. You have to take a risk to invest. Feel free. Event that we are doing next week, and it is all about investing, both mindset, getting ready for it, but the nitty gritty of identifying stocks, understanding what calculated risk is, et cetera. So hopefully that will help. Lauren, anything else you want to cover on loss aversion and investing? Otherwise, we'll jump right into the biases that people have and how to overcome them.
Yeah, so just keeping in mind with personality, again, it's important that we're not putting ourselves in a box. So if you take one of the quizzes that Claire has put in the chat to identify your money personality, a couple of things to keep in mind. One, just because you have that personality today doesn't mean you're stuck with that personality forever, nor is it always fully within our control. We don't just like flip the light switch and make the decision that we're going to have a different personality than the one we've identified that we have right now. And we don't have to worry about partnering with someone who has some other personality. These aren't astrological signs where there are pairings that will just never work. It's simply a tool to help you kind of better understand where someone else is coming from. Again, whether it's a romantic partner, a child, a parent, a business partner, and finding ways that you can manage money together in the most constructive fashion. The one last thing I really wanted to touch on with this, because someone had asked in advance about helping create money personalities in a child. So if you are a parent and you have kids at home and you're trying to figure out how to help them financially, I would prefer if you tried not to figure out a money personality that you wanted them to have and try to drill that into them. I would rather you just, I don't know. First of all, you're already doing everything that I would want you to do, which is recognizing that you want to play a role in your child's financial education and just empowering them as.
Oh, Lauren, I think your internet. Oh man, as everybody on this
values money and allow them to kind of start early and personality, but I would be wary of trying to like put them in a box or set them on a particular track as far as personality is concerned.
Laura has a good question. Should parents talk to kids about their financial problems? I'll let you answer real quick, and then I do want to go into the couple of biases that we should watch out for.
Yes. So I personally do believe absolutely you should talk to your children about financial problems. I don't, please understand, I don't mean that we need to be fully transparent with our children. So we don't need to go into immense detail about exactly what's going on or numbers. but it can be incredibly valuable for your child to understand if there are money problems, what they are, what you're doing in order to overcome them. Because imagine the lessons that you are instilling in your child if they can see that you've gone through a turbulent time, you've taken action in order to kind of tackle and manage your finances or whatever the circumstances are, and put yourself in a better position. It's a huge learning opportunity for your child in so many ways, when it comes to like problem solving skills, but also for them to appreciate the role that they play in that household, and again, the values that you have as a family. One example is simply being, if you're transparent with your child, if you're maybe having a money crunch, and whether there's debt, whether there's loss of income, whatever the circumstances might be, trying to keep that as a secret from your child has only potential to cause more issues. Because if they assume everything is fine, if they assume that you have all of the answers and all of the resources, then there's likely going to be unrealistic expectations. And we want to take every opportunity to raise awareness that money has the potential to change. Our relationships with money might change. And even though we might feel one way in terms of security one particular day, that has the ability to change. And that's why staying sort of disciplined about our finances over time is very important. So I could go into more detail, but I definitely don't want to bore anyone to death. But if you're asking my personal opinion, absolutely, there is a constructive way to share money problems with your child.
Fantastic. I totally agree. That being said, I don't have kids, but
I was just gonna say, I'm not a parent, so please take what I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah, in theory, that does sound great. I know that there's 3 kinds of biases, not quite sure how to pronounce it, that we might have. So what are those 3? And then what do we do about it?
So man, there are definitely like top 3 biases that we deal with as investors. There are an abundance more. There's probably an infinite number, but there are things that we can do. So, aside from our money personality, just from like simple human behavior, from a psychological standpoint, there are psychological phenomena that we're all going to fall subject to. And yes, this applies to our financial life. Hindsight bias is one of the big ones that we talk about with investing. So I guarantee everyone on this call, without even having realized it, falls victim to hindsight bias and has likely done so recently. So I don't know if we have the ability to raise our hand in the chat, but if anyone just wants to plug a little yes or no in response to this question, that would be great. Give me a yes or a Y in the chat if at some point over the past few months you asked yourself why you didn't buy stock in Amazon at the beginning of the year. Yeah, there's a lot of whys, a lot of yeses.
Stock in Zoom, yes, Zoom.
Yes, or stock in Zoom, or Apple, right. Or Costco. And hindsight bias, please be assured we all feel this way, right? So hindsight bias is the concept of looking back, and the expression hindsight's 2020, looking back and thinking, oh, that was so obvious. How did I not see it? We were going through a pandemic, right? Nobody was going to be able to go out and shop. How did I not anticipate that Amazon's online sales were going to boom? Or how did I not expect that people were going to go absolutely bonkers at, the big box store, or that everyone, including your grandmother, was going to be using Zoom, right? These are all things that we absolutely struggle from. And in many cases, it may not be quite as obvious as the example that I provided, but hindsight bias is, it happens all the time, whether we feel like we had a missed opportunity, like why didn't I buy that stock before this happened, or why didn't I sell all of my airline stocks before COVID? And it happens when we own investments. or when we see other people, either we feel like they're getting wealthy on those investments. So just be aware that it's really easy to beat yourself up for something that might seem obvious today, that in reality wasn't necessarily as obvious previously. So that's hindsight bias. We experience it all the time in our lives. It's certainly not unique to finances or investing, but it absolutely happens when it comes to investing. The second, which is very similar in nature, is confirmation bias. And that's where we basically justify what we've done because of an outcome. So using a stock example again, if I purchase Amazon now that it's at, I think, somewhere a little under $3,500 a share these days, and tomorrow it goes up by $1, I'll easily be able to say, I was brilliant. I knew I should have bought Amazon at that absolute all-time high because it's up today. It's up today. That was a really good decision. Or if I sold it at $3,500 and it goes down by $1, I'm brilliant because look, it went down. I'm justifying that I made the right decision. So confirmation bias is simply the idea that we're justifying a decision we already made because we're looking for an outcome, whether or not it's totally accurate. And I know that there are so many questions going on in the chat right now, and I apologize because they're coming through so quickly that I can't read them all one at a time. So if you are asking questions about investing and you would like to speak one-on-one, I will kind of give them a little bit more information as we wrap up, but there absolutely will be time for that. I just want to apologize if we don't have the opportunity to respond to your question in the chat right now.
And it does look like most of the chat is actually just people chatting and not asking questions.
But okay, great.
But good to recognize those questions. And I appreciate you saying that. I think there's one more bias that, and by the way, when you mentioned confirmation bias, sort of rewarding yourself or, that you made the right decision, right? Well, the flip side of that is beating yourself up if you made, quote, the wrong decision. My understanding is that we're not really rational beings and that we actually know a lot less than we think we do. So, we make the best information we can with the information that best decision that we can with the information that we have. But I think there's a sort of acceptance / letting go that needs to happen that you just quite don't have the control as much as you think you do. Hopefully that was right. Okay, that's how I've been living my life. So last biases, and then we'll wrap it up, guys. Everybody listening, we're going to go just a couple minutes longer. So I appreciate you all being here. If you need to hop off, totally fine, because we'll be sending you the recording. So yeah, Lauren, take it away on the last biases.
Yeah, so
sorry.
No, that's fine.
I don't know how to speak today. Got it.
So reference bias is really like the idea that we can compare things in any fashion that seems suitable. So in a similar way to justify our decisions. So we might be using like particular reference points that either justify or warrant decisions that we're making. So it could be the price you paid for a stock is your reference point. So as an example, if you purchased a stock that was trading at $50 and that company announces that it's having like financial difficulty or earnings continue to come out and earnings are poor, and it's just probably a company that maybe you don't want to own, but it's trading for less than what you purchased it for, there's this bias in that reference. It was $50, I paid $50. I don't want to sell it for less than that, or it shouldn't be worth less than that. Or it was trading at $60 not that long ago. I want to hold on to it until it comes back. It's another way of like pegging information that in some ways is arbitrary, but causes us to make less informed or less wise financial decisions, because the relevant and timely news is telling us something that's different than what our reference is causing us to recall or hold at a higher priority.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that because I think it was Leora who said way back in the chat something about like, shouldn't it be sort of buy low, sell high? Which that's the that's like the
Really,
cliche
absolutely.
and a great framework, but be aware of the reference bias because you maybe don't want to hold on to a stock for so long just to get it to that high mark because that might actually be hurting you in the process. So,
And
yeah.
Kudos to her if she brought that up when I gave the example of Amazon, because just like for a reference, I mentioned, Amazon is trading at all-time highs. And even though that was my example about what happens if it goes up by $1, down by $1, right now the thought is a lot of people are following what's already happened. So yes, absolutely. In an ideal world, if we can buy low and sell high, that is the fundamental goal of investing. But we tend to let fear and greed dictate a lot of our financial decisions. And when we have either fear of missing out because we know other people who invested earlier this year and now they're up 50%, 100%, depending on what they bought, or we're feeling greedy, like, ooh, this stock is up 100% year to date. It's going to keep going up higher. I want to, I don't want to miss out. I'm going to get in now. Those emotions can really drive our decisions instead of looking back objectively and saying, this stock was trading at half the price a year ago. Is this valuation warranted? Is this a valuable investment at this time? So I know that that's probably a better transition into your next investing conversation that we'll get into a little bit more detail, but reference bias is relevant here. But to Leora's point, if we kind of put all the biases aside and just think again about the fundamentals, what are we trying to accomplish when we invest? Buy low, sell high, perfect way to summarize it.
Great, amazing. Last couple of minutes, and thank you all for being here as we go over time because I have so many questions. Framework, identifying priorities. Now that we're feeling good, we've identified our own personalities, maybe we're kind of tripping ourselves up, and that includes the biases that we hold. So how do we get positive here? I took a note, YNMM framework. What does that mean?
So that's just an abbreviation that we use at SoFi. Okay. So if you try to Google it,
I did.
I did. To remember, what did I mean by that? It's your next money move. And the idea here is that there's always a million things that we're trying to do. And I explained this to someone the other day. When it comes to your money, it's so much different than taking care of your health in other ways. So if you have a desire to do all the right things, maybe you have a great skincare routine, you try and get a lot of sleep, you're drinking a lot of water, you eat well, you're exercising. These things don't hinge, cheers. These things don't hinge upon one another. You can do some of those things, but not, but skip another. Or if you skip one routine, it doesn't mean that you can't do the others. You are capable of doing all of them or none of them. When it comes to your money, it's a very, very different approach. And the idea of your next money move is that there should always be one thing, one financial goal that you are focusing on all the time. And the reason we want to focus on one thing at a time is so that the most important thing is getting taken care of as quickly as possible, and you're moving on to the next. So this framework is really setting the expectation that there's always one best thing that you could be focusing on financially. And if you've identified what that is, that should be your main goal until it's accomplished. So for example, if you're starting from scratch and you don't have any cash savings, very first thing you want to do is build up a cash cushion to help you if you have an unexpected expense. So you're doing that before you contribute to your 401k. You're doing it before you make an extra payment on your debt. You're doing it before you put money into a 529 for your child. That is the one thing that is your priority. All of your effort goes there. Once you've accomplished that, you move on to the next. So that's sort of like the concept of your next money move. And I do have more specifics, but I know we're not going to have time to cover it today. But there are absolutely resources on SoFi's website where you can learn more. And again, for anyone who is at all interested in having a one-on-one conversation with either myself personally or another certified financial planner at SoFi, we will absolutely be happy to schedule complimentary appointments for anyone attending today one-on-one.
Great. And we'll send out an email and we'll talk to you, Lauren, after about helping people get involved. Any last words before we wrap it up? This was so good. Every time we do these, it makes me wish that they were, maybe we'll have to do an all day thing. You don't have to commit to it publicly, but we'll talk later. So yeah, so tell us kind of next steps where people can go to keep educating themselves and take action.
Of course. So on SoFi's website, we do have a section called SoFi Learn. So please feel free to visit there if there's any topics in particular that you're looking to read more about. Additionally, if you are not a SoFi member, feel free to visit SoFi.com or download the SoFi mobile app. And on either location, you will have the ability to schedule a one-on-one complimentary appointment with a financial planner like myself. But, you know, in my sort of parting words of wisdom, I hope that everyone learned a little bit something about either finances or themselves, ideally both tonight. But keep in mind, like, we're all here just trying to do our best and be kind to ourselves. This is a process. We're not trying to like be perfect overnight with our money. So if you attended today and you paid attention and you learned something, you're trending in the right direction. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I promise it's going to turn out well.
Yay. And I have to say a disclaimer, this was just general financial advice. These are opinions. This is general advice, but they're not specific. Don't sue us. This is a starting off point to further your education and a sort of universal framework to begin to understand this stuff. So I had to disclaimer that. Otherwise, I think we did it. I saw Molly just jumped into the chat. She has been working with us, and so she has a URL for you all. I'm going to send everybody an email with the recording, with the chat, which is great because people put in their LinkedIn. So go and network with one another, as well as contact information and ways to keep going. Make this fun. Make this fun. Learn about your own personality. This is something I wish Cosmopolitan magazine did back in the day, and not just ask us about, you know, again, the romantic relationships, but also the relationships we have with ourselves and finance, because that is such a huge part of life. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the hundreds of women who came. We're just so proud of you all for taking command of your bank account, and we'll see you online.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week.